The story begins with Mallory behind the wheel of her SUV, driving along an isolated road that cuts through the arid landscape toward Denver. She is only 2 weeks away from her wedding, but the expression she carries on her face is not that of a happy and eager bride, but of a woman desperately seeking a moment of inner silence. The sun beats down on the asphalt as she receives a call from her sister, Elaine. Mallory forces an upbeat tone, claiming that the scenery is wonderful and that she has decided to take an alternative route, much longer and more deserted, just to enjoy the isolation for a while longer. Elaine questions whether she is truly happy about the wedding, and Mallory lies with rehearsed conviction, saying that everything is perfect. Soon after, she listens to a voice message from her fiancé, Brad, whose voice overflows with concern only about work and professional commitments, highlighting the emotional abyss that exists between them. Mallory turns off the device and focuses on the road, arriving at a fork where a wooden sign points toward the mountains. She chooses the less traveled path, where the cell signal disappears completely and civilization seems to fall behind. The car engine begins to fail intermittently until it dies entirely, forcing her to pull over onto the dusty shoulder. She tries to call roadside assistance, but the phone screen displays a total lack of signal. The isolation begins to weigh on her when Christian appears walking down the road with a backpack over his shoulders. He appears to be a harmless drifter and approaches with a helpful smile, noticing the mechanical problem. Skillfully, he tinkers with the engine components and manages to get the vehicle running again. Mallory feels a wave of relief and gratitude, and in an impulsive gesture of courtesy, offers a ride to the man who helped her. As soon as he gets into the car, the atmosphere shifts. The silence that was once relaxing becomes heavy. Christian begins observing every detail about Mallory, from the engagement ring on her finger to the way she grips the steering wheel. He starts a conversation about destiny, suggesting that their meeting is not accidental and that the universe has specific plans for people. Mallory tries to keep the conversation light, but her discomfort grows when Christian mentions that he knows she is running from something. His tone becomes predatory and invasive. When he begins uttering obscene words and inappropriate suggestions, Mallory realizes the real danger she has put herself in. She slams the brakes and orders him out of the car, but Christian does not move.
No.
Instead, he pulls out a sharp knife and holds it close to her body, ordering her to keep driving. Terror takes over, and Mallory obeys, her hands trembling and her heart racing. He mocks her marriage, claiming that she invited him into her life because she did not want to reach the altar. Mallory notices that Christian is not wearing a seatbelt and sees in that detail her only chance of survival. Spotting a sharp and dangerous curve ahead, she makes an extreme decision. She accelerates the SUV to maximum speed and at the peak of the curve violently turns the steering wheel with all her strength. The impact is brutal. The car loses contact with the ground, flipping repeatedly down the embankment as metal twists and windows explode into thousands of shards. The SUV comes to rest upside down in a deep ditch, surrounded by smoke and the smell of gasoline. When Mallory regains consciousness, the world is inverted and the pain is indescribable agony. She looks down and sees her left leg horribly crushed between the seat and the deformed dashboard structure. Blood begins to flow and she uses what strength she has left to tear her own shirt and create an improvised tourniquet. That is when she hears footsteps on the gravel outside. Christian appears at the shattered window, practically unharmed because he was thrown into a patch of soft vegetation. He shows no remorse or intention to help. He observes Mallory's suffering with a sadistic smile, delighting in her vulnerability. He walks around the vehicle, banging on the twisted metal and making jokes about the fate she chose when she tried to kill him. Christian ignores her cries for help and her pleas, making it clear that he is now the master of the situation and that she will have to face the agony alone in that God-forsaken place. He turns his back and disappears into the woods, leaving Mallory to endure the first night of horror, trapped in the wreckage as the mountain cold begins to intensify. Darkness envelops the valley, and Mallory finds herself alone in the oppressive silence of the mountain, where the wind howls through the twisted frame of the overturned SUV. The cold begins to seep into the metal, making her shiver uncontrollably, while the adrenaline from the crash fades, giving way to physical exhaustion. She desperately searches for any form of protection against the dropping temperature and finds a jacket in the back seat, pulling it toward her with difficulty due to the limited space and the searing pain radiating from her left leg. The sound of branches snapping in the surrounding woods sends her heartbeat racing, and she imagines predators lurking in the shadows, watching her vulnerability. In a surge of panic, she reaches out and presses the car horn, the shrill sound cutting through the night in a desperate and rhythmic cry, but the echo is the only response she receives. She turns on the headlights briefly, the beams slicing through the fog and revealing only ghostly tree trunks, before turning them off to conserve what little battery remains. The night feels endless, a succession of violent shivers and brief moments of restless sleep, frequently interrupted by the physical agony of her crushed limb. When the first rays of sunlight appear on the horizon, Mallory awakens with a horrible itching sensation and realizes in horror that dozens of ants are crawling up her wounded leg, drawn by the blood that coagulated overnight. She shakes them off frantically with trembling hands, fighting nausea and growing weakness. Thirst becomes an unbearable torment, turning her throat into a desert of sand, and she looks at the fallen water bottle beside her, realizing only a few precious sips remain. She drinks the liquid in a controlled manner, feeling each drop descend before the container is completely empty. Searching through the chaotic interior of the vehicle, her fingers find a leather wallet. It is Christian's wallet, dropped during the initial confrontation. She opens it carefully, examining the documents and photographs, trying to find any clue about the psychopath's identity or something she can use as psychological leverage against him. Suddenly, Christian reappears at the top of the embankment, watching her from above with cruel indifference. He carries supplies and a bottle of cold water, but his presence is purely to torment her. He descends and sits a few meters from the broken window, calmly eating a sandwich with deliberate slowness, making sure she hears every movement and smells the food denied to her. He mocks her situation, describing how her life is now reduced to that metal tomb and how fate has finally caught up to reveal her true nature. With a sadistic smile, he mentions that he found an isolated house nearby and will fetch more provisions there, leaving her once again plunged into absolute emptiness. Mallory realizes her survival time is rapidly decreasing and that rescue will not come on its own. She finds a piece of map paper and a pen in the glove compartment, beginning to write a final message with trembling hands, detailing Christian as her attacker and likely killer, leaving the note in a visible place in case someone finds the wreckage. The second night arrives, bringing even harsher and merciless cold. Mallory tries to turn on the car heater again, but the electrical system fails completely, leaving her exposed to the frost forming on the windows. She finds a lighter in the center console and begins tearing pages from manuals and magazines, burning them inside an empty can to generate minimal warmth, watching the small flames dance while fighting not to inhale toxic smoke in the confined space. During the early morning hours, the horror reaches a new level when wild rats enter the vehicle through open gaps, attracted by the scent of incipient decay and leftover food. She fights the rodents using her keys as a weapon, killing one in a burst of rage and primitive desperation. Hunger is so devastating that after hours of hesitation and tears, she forces herself to consume the raw meat of the animal to keep her metabolism functioning and avoid fainting. Thirst drives her to another extreme and humiliating measure. She collects her own urine in a plastic container and drinks it, battling a powerful gag reflex to ensure her organs do not shut down. The next morning, a mechanical and rhythmic sound pulls her from a trance of pain. It is the vibration of her cell phone, which she believed lost or destroyed, lodged beneath the debris of the passenger seat. She stretches as far as she can, feeling her leg pull agonizingly until her fingers brush the device. However, Christian returns before she can retrieve it. She quickly hides the movement, pretending to be unconscious. He proudly recounts that he spent the last hours repairing the road sign, ensuring no one suspects a vehicle crossed the barrier and fell into the ravine. He brings a heavy canvas bag and tosses it into the car, saying it is a gift. The phone rings again, and the electronic tone exposes Mallory's secret in the silence of the ditch. Christian enters the vehicle in a wild fury, initiating a brief physical struggle where Mallory attempts to strike him, but he is stronger. He rips the phone from her hands and smashes it violently against the ground, destroying her last connection to the outside world. He then reveals that the owners of the nearby house returned, but that he took control of the situation, turning them into his toys. He looks at Mallory with a manic gleam and questions her will to live, removing a sharp metal saw from the bag and placing it on the dashboard right before her eyes. The command is visual and absolute. He wants her to cut off her own limb to free herself, turning her escape into an act of brutal self-mutilation. Christian leaves the scene laughing, leaving her alone with the cutting tool as the first drops of an approaching storm begin striking the shattered windshield. Mallory watches raindrops slide across the cracked glass, initially as relief for her devastating thirst, but soon realizes nature is about to become a new jailer. She stretches her arm through the broken window, collecting the precious liquid in a plastic bag found among the wreckage, drinking the muddy water with near-animal urgency, ignoring the taste of earth. The car radio, in a final gasp of power, emits static before tuning into a local station warning of severe storms and flash floods in the region, mentioning the main highway is being evacuated due to a nearby forest fire, explaining why no one travels that secondary road. Panic rises in her throat when she realizes the ditch where the SUV rests is rapidly filling with water, transforming the vehicle into a submerged tank. The sound of an approaching engine makes her heart pound and she sees headlights at the top of the hill. It is Christian returning, but Mallory now possesses cunning born of absolute desperation. She grabs the remains of the rat she killed earlier and smears blood and rotting flesh over her wounded leg and the saw blade, creating a horrific scene to convince the psychopath she has begun the self-mutilation or succumbed to infection. When Christian descends to observe her, he approaches the window with morbid curiosity, believing Mallory has finally broken psychologically. In that moment of proximity, she attacks with a shard of glass she had hidden, striking his face with force born purely of survival instinct. In the confusion, Christian's keyring falls into the car. Mallory grabs it and, in an act of defiance, activates the SUV's panic alarm. The lights flash and the horn blares violently through the valley, an electronic scream for help that Christian frantically tries to silence. He attempts to recover the keys, but she throws them into the rising mud and water. The alarm attracts the attention of a police cruiser patrolling the upper area, and Mallory screams with every fiber of her lungs, but the storm and isolation muffle her voice. Christian, maintaining a mask of normality, climbs the embankment and intercepts the officer, claiming his car broke down and that the alarm is just a malfunction from an abandoned vehicle further ahead. Distracted by the wildfire emergency and trusting Christian's appearance, the officer offers him a ride, leaving Mallory behind in the growing darkness. The water now reaches her waist inside the overturned car, and the cold becomes a lethal threat of hypothermia. She realizes that if she does not escape within minutes, she will drown in her metal tomb. She looks at the saw Christian left. There is no room left for hesitation or hope of outside rescue. Mallory takes a deep breath. Each movement of the saw is agony beyond physical description, a silent scream lost in the thunder as she cuts not only tissue but her connection to weakness. Finally, the weight trapping her ceases. Mallory collapses into the water, feeling thermal shock and blood loss, but now she is free from the wreckage. She drags herself through the broken window, emerging from the water like a creature reborn from chaos, and begins climbing the steep embankment using only her hands and brute strength, leaving behind the SUV and a part of herself. She crawls onto the asphalt, following the tire tracks of the car that carried Christian, determined to find the house where he keeps his other victims and end the nightmare permanently. Mallory advances through dense and soaked vegetation, each movement a testament to resilience bordering on impossible. She ignores the trail of blood she leaves on the wet earth, focused only on the faint light emanating from the isolated cabin at the end of the muddy path. The rain muffles her groans as she approaches the wooden structure, hiding among tree shadows to observe inside. Through a moisture-blurred window, she sees Christian moving calmly through the house, as if he were its rightful owner. He has discarded his dirty clothes and now wears the uniform of the police officer who tried to help Mallory hours earlier, a cruel facade revealing his contempt for human life. Mallory notices the lifeless bodies of the elderly couple who lived in the residence. Hatred replaces the fear in her chest, providing the fuel she needs to continue moving despite her injury. She finds a side entrance and enters the house with predatory silence, feeling the heat of the room contrast violently with the deadly cold that almost consumed her in the ditch. In the basement of the residence, she locates Sue, a terrified and tied-up young woman who watches Mallory's arrival with a mix of shock and hope. Mallory signals absolute silence, ears attuned to every step Christian takes upstairs. The psychopath descends the stairs with manic confidence, unaware that his prey has become his hunter. Mallory hides behind a heavy door, gripping a weapon and waiting for the moment Christian enters to torment Sue. She emerges from the shadows with wild fury, initiating a physical confrontation where the pain in her leg is forgotten in favor of retribution. Christian attempts to overpower her with superior strength, but the fate he so exalted finally turns against him. In the struggle, Mallory uses her own weight to push Christian toward the dark yard, where he steps directly into one of the bear traps the former owners scattered across the property. Mallory approaches with difficulty, leaning against the porch structure, observing the man who tortured her now reduced to a victim of circumstance. He begs for mercy, but Mallory offers no words. She removes a blade and throws it before him, letting it fall into the mud within reach of his trembling hands. The gesture completes a cycle of horror. If he wishes to live, he must perform the same bloody sacrifice he demanded of her. Mallory rescues Sue, and both leave the property while Christian's screams echo into the open air.